Hey everybody, Saigan here to do another collection video. Everyone really liked my Final Fantasy collection. This collection isn't as large, but it's one of my favorite collections. It certainly pales in comparison to the Dragon Quest collection, and there's a lot more Final Fantasy to go around than this series, which is a shame. This is my favorite RPG series, even though Sega and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship. In fact, they seem to have a love-hate relationship with everybody. If you haven't heard about the whole debacle regarding Sega and its copyright claims against Shining Force videos on YouTube, I said it. Here comes the Sega police. They've been going crazy taking down any Shining Force related videos lately. And nobody's really exactly sure why, because they haven't issued a response. Total Biscuit had a lot of information on it, and I'll go ahead and I'll try and link his video regarding his issue with them. Anyhow, this is for Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star is actually my favorite RPG series of all time. And when I decided to start doing Let's Plays, it was a toss-up between Dragon Quest on the one hand and Phantasy Star on the other. Do I go with the game that got me started on RPGs and has largely never really changed, and that's a good thing for Dragon Quest. A Dragon Quest fan can go into a new Dragon Quest game and it's always going to be familiar. They can go into a Dragon Quest game and say, I'm going to like this. Phantasy Star is a bit different. They're not as wild about changing as Final Fantasy, but they did make a pretty significant change during the Dreamcast years. Some of you already know which game I'm referring to, but it was a good change, and it actually made Phantasy Star even more popular, especially here in the West. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the original. This is Phantasy Star for the Master System. Wonderful game. I really wanted to do a Let's Play of this. I may eventually get around to doing a Let's Play of it. Got the cartridge right here. Now, Master System cartridges were always very boring. Unfortunately, I don't have one with the instruction book. Always holding out hope for it. Now, if you have a Master System, I have news for you. This game is not that hard to find. This is actually a fairly common game, and I think I got this for like 10 bucks in the case. Great game to pick up. Amazing for the time. I think it was competing with Dragon Quest II, but it's also the only Phantasy Star in the series to have first-person dungeons, and they scrolled so smoothly. If you look at other classic RPGs from the console era that had first-person dungeons, Sega's Shining in the Darkness, for instance, the dungeons didn't scroll very smoothly. The dungeons in this scrolled like, I don't have a word for it, very smoothly. Fantastic game, all around. It's still one of my favorites to go back and play now and then, and much like the original Dragon Warrior, you can knock this out in an afternoon if you know what you're doing. If it's your first time playing, though, definitely download a FAQ and all the maps, or you're going to wind up needing graph paper. Nobody can go through this game blind. The final dungeons, like Baya Malay, is a huge, like, 8-story dungeon. And it's all in first person. And every wall in the dungeon looks the same. It is a hell of a maze to get through blind. So, again, Phantasy Star. Fantastic game. I highly recommend this. Moving on. Starting a new stack. So, the Genesis came out, and everyone got gifted with Phantasy Star II. Now, this is actually not the real case. I took an empty Genesis case and I just printed up the box art because it looks nice. I can't find the freaking box art for what I feel is a reasonable price, but anyhow, here's the cartridge. Phantasy Star II did a lot for the series. Finally had some memorable music. The party system in this was really cool. You start off as the main character, Rolf and Nay. Nay was an interesting character because she gained her levels and stats as well at twice the speed of any of the human players. So she was very, very much a powerhouse in your party. And tragedy strikes about halfway into the game. And let's just say Eris is a giant ripoff of what happened to Nay. Okay, so that's kind of a spoiler. But let's be honest here, this game came out in 1989. I think the spoiler alert has been lifted. Great game. This is also probably the hardest in the entire series. It's very, very grindy, like Korean MMO level grindy. And the dungeons went from being these very tight, you know, crazy, tiny hallways that were very claustrophobic in the original Phantasy Star to these sprawling open areas in Phantasy Star II. You could go into some of the earliest dungeons in the game and become wildly lost, even though there were just 2 floors, because the floors were so big. This is one of those games that back in the day came with a listing of all the maps and items because you needed it to get through the game. Don't feel bad about downloading a FAQ and downloading the maps for this game. You will definitely want it. Beating it was absolutely incredible. There's a crazy plot twist at the end, and it is worth playing just for the plot twist. Also, unlike Final Fantasy, Phantasy Star has actually gone through the trouble of staying tied together. This one takes place 1,000 years after the ending of the original Phantasy Star. Fantastic game. I also recommend it, less so than the first one, but definitely recommend it. I'm like 99% sure that this is on WiiWare and Xbox Live Arcade, and it's definitely on Steam. So, great game. Worth picking up. I would rank it behind the original. Personally, I know a couple of people who think that Phantasy Star II is superior. And they've got good reasons for that. But I just feel that Phantasy Star I plays better because it's got a better curve to it. Phantasy Star II will punch you in the mouth if you haven't gone and grinded enough. Now we are up to Phantasy Star III, Generations of Doom. This baby came out in 1991. Another 16-bit gem. This is the actual case. Black and white instruction manual. Got the cartridge. This is kind of an oddball child in this series, and it is my least favorite out of the original grouping of games, unless you want to count the terrible Game Gear games, which I'm not even going to talk about because I don't own those. I have played them, though. Not that good. This is not in any way a bad game. And some people actually view it as their favorite Phantasy Star game. It did a lot of really neat things for the time, in that at the end of each section of the game, your character was given a choice of who they were going to marry. And then the next section of the game starts off as you playing as their children. And it does this for 3 generations, I want to say. There's 6 endings to this game, depending on which character you have at the end of the game, based entirely on their lineage. Neat idea. Terrible, terrible box art. I don't know if you can see that. You might just want to Google it. It's pretty hilariously bad. Also, the live-action commercials that they did for Phantasy Star are just terrible. The graphics in this also fell short. I think they were trying to be more detailed than Phantasy Star II's graphics, and in the end it just came out feeling kind of bland and gray. This did introduce Rappies, Rag Rappies. They've kind of grown into being the series mascot, much like the Chocobo for Final Fantasy, except Rag Rappies are enemies. You don't ride them. Alright, Phantasy Star IV. Easily, I have to say it's the best game out of the original Phantasy Star series. Some people will argue with me back and forth, but this is one of my top 3 RPGs of all time, right up there with Final Fantasy VI and Dragon Quest VIII. This game is incredible, and it ties together the 3 previous games into an amazing conclusion for the classic Phantasy Star series. This is the cardboard box version of the game that we got in the Genesis days. I've got the instruction book hidden back there. I don't really feel like pulling it out. Very good difficulty curve. It had comic book style cutscenes for character dialogue between them. And all the characters in this game are great. Every character is lovable. And you'll actually find yourself at times really wondering like who you want to switch out of your party based on who you like and who might actually be best for the job. And every character in this is best for the job sometimes. Fantastic game, brings the series to a wonderful, wonderful close. I have nothing negative to say about this game. If you're going to play any Phantasy Star game, this is the one to play. Without playing the previous 3, it will lose a small amount of the epic storytelling. But it does actually cover all of it. Throughout the game, you are given the history from the previous titles. If you played the previous titles, like I had when I played through this, everything just kind of lined up, and it was really magical to see. I know plenty of people who have played this who have not played any other Phantasy Star, and they still think that this is one of the best RPGs ever made, and arguably the greatest on the Genesis. This game destroys most Final Fantasies, except for maybe 6. 6 is a hard one to beat. 6 set the bar. So, that brings us out of the classic era. There were a couple of collections released for the original Phantasy Star series. Here in the US, and probably the easiest Phantasy Star to locate, is the Phantasy Star collection for the Game Boy Advance. This is definitely worth getting for Phantasy Star II and Phantasy Star III. Phantasy Star I has a horrible, horrible bug, though, where it blue screens if you try and save. It's not an all-the-time thing. I've had it happen as often as once every 20 minutes. And sometimes I can go full days without it happening. So definitely be wary of trying to play Phantasy Star I on the GBA collection. 2 and 3 are fine. 2 and 3 work perfectly well. But it is a known problem that Phantasy Star I doesn't always save correctly, and in fact will just glitch out and blue screen the game. And then when you come back, your save data has been lost. So it's hard for me to recommend this over just emulating the games. My favorite part of my collection is the Japan-only Phantasy Star collection for the Sega Saturn. This came with a whole bunch of goodies. This came with all 4 of the original series Phantasy Stars, as well as a bunch of maps and instructions, and there's all sorts of art on the disc. It's really, you know, the way collections should be done. So here's like, you know, here's one of the maps from Phantasy Star III. This is in no way the entirety of the Phantasy Star III world. This is a very small 1/7 of it, by my educated guess. Phantasy Star... Which one is this? This is Phantasy Star IV, End of the Millennium. Here's the map for Motavia. It's important to realize that in the Phantasy Star series, travel to other planets is fairly common. In the first Phantasy Star alone, there were 3 planets to fully explore, and it wasn't like, you know, going to the moon in Final Fantasy IV, where it was actually just kind of its own small dungeon-type world map. No, Phantasy Star doesn't do that. The world maps in Phantasy Star IV are full maps with multiple planets, and it's great. The most useful out of these maps, though, is definitely the one for Phantasy Star II. Due to the story of Phantasy Star II, the world map is actually partitioned in a very, very strange way. And you learn more about why the world map is the way it is as you play Phantasy Star II. It's a great story. It's very much a Big Brother type story and world. And then it's just got, you know, the standard booklet inside with an ad for Road to Win Soccer 98. Just a little piece of Sega Phantasy Star history. The original version of the game also has the FM sound, I want to say remix, re-recording. There were different music tracks for the FM version of... I can't get this in here properly right now. Off to the side with you. I will fix you later. Where was I? Phantasy Star I had a separate music recording for the Master System and for the... I can't remember what it is. It's neat. So there's technically 2 different soundtracks to the game. The Sega Saturn version let you pick which one you were going to listen to. Okay, and moving out of that portion of Phantasy Star history brings us into more of the modern day. This is how most people know Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star Online for the Sega Dreamcast. This was the first online console MMO. This is actually the one that introduced me to the series. You've seen my Let's Play, possibly. I've done a Let's Play of the first episode worth of Phantasy Star Online. Amazing, amazing game. Very little bad to say about it, aside from the controls did not age very well, and the camera especially did not age well. But it's my favorite game of all time. Phantasy Star Online is my favorite game of all time. Wonderful, wonderful game. If you're going to jump into Phantasy Star Online, though, my recommendation is that you skip past the Dreamcast versions for control reasons, and the menu got cleaned up in later versions. The best way to go is to find the... people are running private servers for the PC version of Phantasy Star Blueburst, and they actually work very well, very short install. I wouldn't feel too bad about it technically being pirated because Sega closed the servers. They're not making any money off of Phantasy Star Online anymore. If they were, I'd probably still have my account and still be playing. Phantasy Star Online version 2 introduced hacking protection, because hacking was a huge, huge problem on the original version of the game. It also introduced Ultimate Mode and raised the level cap from 100 all the way to 200 and brought with it tons more items to find, and Challenge Mode as well. This was the best edition on the Dreamcast of the two. This is also the one that people kind of got irritated over because it introduced a monthly fee. The original one did not have a monthly fee. Now, with the lack of monthly fee also meant nobody was really policing the servers. This one protected you against a lot of the hackers online, and was overall a cleaner experience. Ultimate mode was definitely worth it too, because getting through very hard was not super challenging. Getting through Ultimate, though, that was pretty cool if you could do it. So for the GameCube, did I grab my Xbox version? I didn't. So I also have the Xbox version of Phantasy Star Online, but apparently I didn't grab it in my great big pile of games when I was getting set up to do the video. Here's the original release of Phantasy Star Online for the GameCube. There were actually 2 releases of Phantasy Star Online for the GameCube, Episode 1 and 2. It doubled the length of the Dreamcast game with the addition of Episode 2, an entire new game, and your save data was freely transferable between the two. We also got Plus. It's pretty easy to tell Plus apart because Plus has a blue background as opposed to a white one. It also says Plus. Very, very tiny right there. Plus also introduced more protection. It introduced a couple new offline quests, and most importantly, among those offline quests was the towers. You could now do offline. The towers were the really ultimate end game area. They had the nastiest enemies, but also the best loot. Eventually, when I go back to doing my Phantasy Star Let's Play, I will get to the towers, and that's probably where I'm going to die. I got through all of Ultimate Episode 1 without dying once. Can probably do it on 2, although 2's got a lot more instant death flying around than Episode 1. The towers are going to kill me so many times. Again, great games. Then things got a bit weird. We got Phantasy Star Online Episode 3 Card Revolution, which takes place after Episodes 1 and 2, and also after Episode 4, which hadn't come out yet. Numbering got a bit strange. This is actually a grid-based strategy RPG played with cards. I know what you're saying, Sai. That sounds pretty stupid. But the gameplay itself doesn't actually look like a card game. The gameplay itself looks like a real-time strategy game. Your decks are represented in cards as far as the enemies that you can summon if you're playing on the side of the Arcs, or the equipment that you can give yourself if you're playing on the side of the Hunters. There was kind of one of those, you know, good or evil type storylines, but in typical RPG fashion, neither side was actually really evil, and they kind of come together at the end to deal with, you know, a greater enemy. This turned out to actually be a really, really good game. I spent a great amount of time playing this online with friends. Had a lot of fun. I still have my save. May eventually do an LP on this as well. It had New Game Plus, so even after you finished the game, you could go back with all of your cards and everything, your full collection, and start the story over from the beginning. This also brought back the storytelling aspect from Phantasy Star IV, telling the story using comic book style cutscenes. I think there are like 12 playable characters in this, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. If you can find it on the cheap, it's worth grabbing. If you're into card games or strategy RPGs, it's worth playing. Next up, we have a couple of soundtracks. This is really just the original soundtracks for the original version of the game and the Episode 1 and 2 version of the game. The series has some amazing music in it. And that right there is the end of Phantasy Star Online. There's the Blue Burst edition, which only had a digital release on PC. There are still lots of people playing that on the private servers. It's good fun. Great game. You owe it to yourself to try it out. Okay. What do we have next? Oh, you. This one is questionable. So. Oh, Phantasy Star Universe. What do I say about you? Game Informer actually put it best, I think. They knew that Phantasy Star Universe had failed where online had succeeded when 2 weeks after the game had released, everybody working at Game Informer was still on good terms with their spouses. Nothing is particularly wrong with Phantasy Star Universe, but it represents the lowest point in the series as a whole. It suffers too much from, oh, let's add lots of cutscenes and tell a story, and they got sucked into the Final Fantasy mindset where they had to have lots of pretty long-haired characters and spiky-haired heroes and people with large swords and anime-style cutscenes. And it didn't really work. The main character, and half of my irritation with Phantasy Star Universe is going to be the voice acting. And the main character, Ethan, is just such a tool. He's not... I don't dislike him like I dislike Cloud. I dislike Cloud because Cloud has a lack of character. Ethan is just trying too hard to have character. And it's overflowing. The character designers on Ethan went way too far. Most of the supporting characters in this are just terrible. You don't want to listen to any of them. The voice acting, again, the voice acting is just so bad. The best part of this game was the villain, Magaki, because he was a psychotic bastard. He's the real reason to play this game. He's the star. The gameplay itself, they made it too grindy, and the dungeons weren't randomized enough. In the end, Phantasy Star Online, each dungeon had, I think, like 12 minimum possibilities as far as how it was going to generate. Phantasy Star Universe took that down to like 2 to 4, depending on which area you were in. The dungeons were shorter, the bosses were less interesting, and there was too much focus on grinding up your photon arts. Photon arts were the replacement for magic. In Phantasy Star Online, all you had to do was go and find a new disc, and you would have the next level up from magic. In Phantasy Star Universe, you had photon arts, and each photon art had its own experience level. Now, if you were playing as a hunter, using just like 1 or 2 particular weapons, this wasn't too bad. If you're playing as a force or a ranger who needs to be able to switch between a wide variety of different spells or different types of bullets, depending on, you know, what the situation calls for in order to appropriately support your team, you were fucked. It took hours and hours and hours of grinding just to get my basic heal spell to the point where it could heal other players. You shouldn't have to spend hours of gameplay just grinding a healing spell, which by the way, only got experience points if you were hurt, so you could heal party members. It created this terrible thing where I lost my train of thought. Skip over universe. Skip over universe. The good news about Universe, however, is Ambition of the Illuminous came out. This is a free upgrade if you have the Xbox 360 version of Phantasy Star Universe, which is only like $5 or $10 these days anyways. Ambition of the Illuminous corrected a lot of the issues. It evened out the grind, it made leveling your photon arts much less painful, and the characters that they introduced in Ambition of Illuminous were way, way, way better than any of the established characters. And they took Ethan's character, and they're like, okay, well, he's got this kind of bad past, and the way the original game ended, let's do something with Ethan. Let's make him a good, complex character. And they did that. They actually fixed a terrible, terrible character in this. I hated Ethan. Ethan's okay. Leia, the girl on the cover, she's actually a pretty cool character too. Maybe Ambition of the Illuminous just seems good to me because it was so much better than the original release of Phantasy Star Universe. It's a possibility. I also have the PC version. Last I heard, there were people working on getting a private server set up for the PC edition. Last I checked, it was not actually coming along too far, but that was a while ago. I haven't really looked too far into it since then, because the Xbox 360 edition of the game is still up and running, and on the odd occasion I feel like playing Phantasy Star Universe, I can just hop on the 360 and play that. There is still a subscription fee, though, of about $10 a month. And the worst part is that you cannot cancel your subscription through the Xbox dashboard. You actually have to call customer support and tell them to cancel your Phantasy Star Universe subscription, which is just terrible. The amount of trouble that it goes through canceling your subscription completely negates any enjoyment of actually playing the game online. Definitely say pass. Its time is over. It was okay for a little bit while everyone was still kind of waiting for the next Phantasy Star Online. But they honestly just, there was no heart to these games. It was Sega's bid at trying to popularize the series more with what other RPGs doing, instead of focusing on what Phantasy Star does right. Now, the most recent games in the series have actually been a huge improvement. We got Phantasy Star Portable, which they took Universe, they removed the voice acting mostly. Characters still say the occasional thing. You no longer have to explore town. You just say, like, I want to go to this shop and buy this. I know that seems like a small thing, but the hub town in Phantasy Star Universe was huge. Getting anywhere in that game was impossible. And the quick travel system just didn't cut it. So Phantasy Star Portable built on everything that Ambition of Illuminus was correcting and corrected more. This is definitely a worthwhile game to play, especially if you've got some friends. You can play it 4 players, just like in Monster Hunter. The character creation in Phantasy Star, I haven't mentioned this yet, the character creation in Phantasy Star blows away the character creation in most games. Except for like very, very, very recently, other games have started to finally catch up to just how great the character creation in the Phantasy Star series has been since Phantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast. Not many other games have come close. Good game. The story kind of suffers a bit in this one. It's not very good. But the gameplay is there. The gameplay is definitely enjoyable. It's a lot of fun to play, especially multiplayer. Worth picking up if you can find it for a couple of bucks. Phantasy Star Portable 2. Now this is the real gem. They brought back some of the team that worked on Phantasy Star Online to make a second Phantasy Star Portable. They did everything right. There's nothing wrong with this game. The story can be a bit cliche and anime at times, but a drastic improvement. And I would say that the story is up there with maybe the average Final Fantasy. Let's say around Final Fantasy, 4 and 8's level of storytelling. Maybe better than that. It doesn't come off as soap opera-y, but the gameplay in this is absolutely phenomenal. The gameplay is the real reason to play this. We didn't get the follow-up. Japan got Phantasy Star Portable 2 Infinite, and we did not get that. It added more quests, more items, etc., etc., etc. But this is still great to pick up, and it should be pretty cheap these days. This has been out for a while. If you have a PSP and you're like, man, I wish I had a freaking game to play on PSP, Phantasy Star Portable 2. Lots of fun, especially if you've got some friends to play with you. If you have a DS, Phantasy Star Zero is another one made in the style of Phantasy Star Online. monitor glare was really starting to bother me there. Made like Phantasy Star Online, set in its own new world. I'm kind of sad that I haven't seen really anything to indicate that this is going to be getting a follow-up. You had the classic series, and then you had the online series, and then the universe series, and all those games were connected to, you know, the rest of that particular series in themselves. Phantasy Star Zero is just kind of a standalone. It's not connected to any of the other games in the series. Good game. One of the better Nintendo DS games. One of the better titles. The multiplayer on it is good. In fact, this had actual online multiplayer, which is rare for DS games. I don't see actual true online multiplayer for most DS RPGs. Usually it's all going to be local or something. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that. Portable 2 also did online multiplayer. So you can play this one online, and it is infrastructure, not just ad hoc. Well, that ends all the games. There is Phantasy Star Online 2 that I think already came out in Japan. I played the beta for a little bit. It's a solid game. I'm pretty happy with like the 20 minutes that I played. It was a very short period of time that I got a chance to play it because it was a closed beta, and they were only running it at like weird Japan hours. So it'd be like, okay, well, that sounds reasonable. Let me check and see what kind of time that is. Oh, 4 o'clock in the morning. No, I won't be on for that. But that's already been announced as being localized. We're going to be getting it for the PC. It is a free-to-play game. Really. A good Phantasy Star game, a follow-up to Phantasy Star Online, and it's free-to-play. Now, it also is coming out for the PlayStation Vita, and that is cross-console to the PC version. You'll be able to use your same character and play with all your friends across either version. You can play at home on your PC and take it on the go on the Vita. Great thing. I don't know if the Vita version is going to cost money. So you might just want to check on that for yourself. I can't remember. I might add it to the video information when I find out. As far as little extra things, I don't have too much as far as like Phantasy Star guides or figures or anything are concerned. So nothing crazy to talk about. I don't have any of the old guides. I do have the old Dreamcast PSO guide. I have the Episode 3 guide, which this thing turned out to be freaking worthless. It's missing cards. It's got the wrong information. This was a terrible purchase. Looks good on a shelf. I never use it. And then we've got the Phantasy Star Universe guide. This was another one that was completely unnecessary. I picked it up because I like Phantasy Star stuff and I like collecting it. And it gives me something to read when I'm like stuck at work and I can't be playing. I'm like, oh, well, I'll read the guide and I'll feel better that way. And again, this suffers from missing information. There are maps in here, and the maps are accurate, but if you can't figure out the maps in Phantasy Star Universe, you need to go back to playing Halo or Call of Duty. Not hating on Halo or Call of Duty. I like Halo. Not a fan of Call of Duty, but let's face it, modern shooters don't have the same maps they used to. On the other front, as far as this is kind of guide related. This is actually more personal, thanks to my history with the series. When I was playing Phantasy Star, and I grabbed it for the Master System, I was like, oh sweet, I'm going to play this the way that it was meant to be played. I hooked it up to like this awful tube television. It didn't even have the buttons. It had the dials on it. So I hooked it up with that. I had to use a VHF UHF adapter to play the Master System on it. So it was perfect. It was exactly the way the game was probably meant to be played. I busted out some graph paper, busted out a notebook. So in here this graph paper pad, which is getting pretty old, and I really need to go over it with ink, is every single dungeon in the game with the listing of all the items. This is all done by me. I'm quite proud of this information. Floor by floor, step by step, I put this together. So it means a lot to me. I keep it with the collection. And honestly, it's my favorite resource to have when playing the original Phantasy Star. I also have this guide that I put together, which has what the NPCs say in every single town, as well as a listing of all the items that can be purchased in every single town. So I have a pretty good walkthrough whenever I feel like going and playing the game again. Some places were more boring than others, but you know, there's that. And continuing my history of putting together my own guides for the game, friends of mine already know what I picked up. When I was first playing Phantasy Star Online, I was playing it over a dial-up connection. I hadn't made the jump to the future with broadband or DSL. Well, there was a lot in Final Fantasy Online. We're talking drop listings for every enemy that were different depending on the people you were playing with. There were there's something called a section ID based on your name, and whoever created the game, drops in the game were dictated by your section ID. So sometimes you weren't even familiar with what could be dropping, because what was dropping for someone else wasn't going to be what would normally be dropping for you in single player. And then there was also challenge mode, which was extremely difficult and complicated maps, timed puzzles, switches, and all very focused on teamwork. Switches had to be hit in the right order at the right times or you were going to fail. And it made for a great, great challenge. But playing on a dial-up connection, some of you younger viewers may not know this pain. You only had one connection at a time on dial-up, and God help you, if somebody called you, your connection was gone. I needed the data when I was playing online, but I couldn't go online to get it. So what did I do? I started printing it up, because I did have a printer. And what that eventually turned into was this. A tome of all of my collected Phantasy Star Online information. Vast majority of this information does come from PSO World, which is probably the best Phantasy Star Online website I've found. There is some information specifically from Japanese sites, but I'm hard-pressed to think of a better Phantasy Star Online resource in print form than my own personally made tome. I made a little cover. So if that doesn't tell you what a fan of this game I was, I don't know what will. Complete with, here's an example page, one of the possible maps, as well as all the possible enemy spawns. And total experience count for killing every enemy on that map, which became very important while you were trying to get leveled up for different portions of Ultimate Mode. I miss this thing. I miss having it sitting next to me. Oh! I do have one more thing. I just realized it because I turned the right way. Hang out right here. I'll be right back. Now this is cool. This is the Japan keyboard controller. Been gathering some dust in the corner lately. Full keyboard situated right in the center of a GameCube controller. This thing was awesome for playing PSO with. Most people played without a keyboard. I was one of those jerks who could talk really fast and then sit there waiting. Well, I knew they were painfully trying to type, which you see me doing when I'm trying to play Dragon Quest X and trying to type with the on-screen keyboard. So this is actually one of my favorite controllers. I always got funny looks when I bring it to, like, you know, a Smash Brothers party. Like, I brought my controller. They're like, what is that? Is that a keyboard? Are you going to play on that? Really? Oh, my favorite controller. I loved handing it off to people. Like, okay, it's your turn. They're like, I can't play with this. It's too big. So that is my Phantasy Star collection. I actually managed to stretch this out to 45 minutes. I'm a bit surprised. I wasn't thinking it was going to go on that long. Fantastic series, wonderful series. Hopefully I will get around to doing more Let's Plays of it. I do have my PSO series. Definitely going to have to get more out. I was going to record Dragon Quest X tonight, but apparently there's a massive update or patch. I'm betting it's going to be Mage Knight. Anyhow, thanks for watching. This will probably go up. I bet this is going to wind up going up on New Year's Day. So, Happy New Year's, everybody. Happy 2013. New Year's resolution. Let's make a New Year's resolution. Continue being awesome. Play more games. You. Hard pointing at the camera. Take care.